I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, November the 2nd, brought to you in part by the International Brangus Breeders Association. This is Brangus Country. For more information on the benefits of introducing Brangus influence into your herd, or to find a production sale in your area, go to gobrangus.com. First of all, I want to thank you guys, those of you that sent up prayers and positive thoughts for my good friend Doug Willett up there in southern Iowa. He made it through his invasive surgery. He went home over the weekend and he's on the mend, on recovery, and prayers work, I guarantee you. And he was awful thankful for you folks that sent up a good thought for him, but I really appreciate that. Let's talk about what's going on here this past week. You guys have listened to me talk about how much I support a minimum mandated cash trade requirement in your fed cattle arena. You've heard us talk about it. I was promoting 30-14, which meant 30% negotiated cash for each major slaughter facility and delivery within 14 days. That kind of got pushed aside because the Midwestern guys took over, and they had policy for 50, and so they started pushing 50-14. I thought, well, let 50 be even better. Let's go 50. So we went 50-14, and we even had Charles Grassley put a bill in Senate. Of course, the Senate Ag Committee would not even hear it, wouldn't put it up for debate, wouldn't put it up for a vote, and couldn't get anything going there, largely due to Pat Roberts, who's the chairman of that committee. But we were sure trying to get 50-14. I thought it was probably too much for the Southern Plains, but you know, it was something we could have worked with. But then now we've got this bill, you know, your Cattle Market Transparency Act, which has been put forth with Deb Fischer with South Dakota, and then Vicky Hartzler has pushed it in the House, and so we're very much trying to get that pushed through. Now you guys know that NCBA is fighting that. They have put forth a voluntary program that people are calling the 75% program, because evidently they want 75% of a robust market. So they've got their sights set pretty lofty high up there, right there. But anyways, they're not just saying that we would rather have the voluntary program. They are literally fighting any kind of a push to get this Cattle Market Transparency Act. And whenever you hear the largest trade association that's quite closely tied with your packers and heavily influenced by them, and also your big corporate feeders, and they're pushing a bill called the Cattle Market Transparency Act, and they're totally against it. I mean, it just makes you scratch your head a little bit. And we talked about, they were having some of your smaller trade organizations were having a meeting in Florida. They were talking about the issues that are facing the industry and the demise of the industry and the vertical integration in the industry, and they had put out an invitation to NCBA, whose new president lives right there close. It wouldn't have been a big deal for him to come over, but then they put out a statement saying that they would not interact or address any of these activists that are out there. And I tell you what, it's really a kind of a crooked, kind of a nasty type of a deal. And I'm telling you all this again, and I know you guys get tired of hearing it, but this past week is your argument for a cash mandate, for a minimum requirement cash mandate. It is it. Okay, so not this past week, but the week before, we saw your board crash. Both live cattle and feeder cattle futures crashed big time. Not this past week, but the week before. It was in fear of the upcoming Cattle on Feed report that was published a week ago Friday, and so everything was just crashing. And we saw your cash fat cattle market go down $3. We saw your real-time index that depicts your 800-pound feeder steers. It went down almost $6.50. And I mean, everything was just falling down around the cattle market. So then we had the Cattle on Feed report, and indeed it was bearish, which makes you wonder if people aren't getting a peek at that thing, because it seemed like they knew exactly what it was going to be. And in fact, they knew it so much, what it was going to be in comparison to your average of the analyst guess. By the time we got that thing Friday afternoon, a week ago Friday afternoon, by Monday it wasn't even bearish anymore. So this past week, we saw your board get a lot of push behind it, and your board just inflated big time this past week, and pretty much erased all of the losses that the board saw the week before. So you'd have thought the market would come back because the board was up big. I'm talking, $5-6, and in most of your nearby contracts, we saw that it all went up right in the face of that supposedly bearish cattle and feed report that actually didn't turn out to be, even though the numbers come in bearish. And we saw that going up. Well, your real-time index on 6-weight or on 8-weight feeder cattle this past week only went up about $2.50. That fell about $4 short of getting our feeder cattle cash market back up there. And then what happened to our fat cattle market? Did it go back up $3 or more that we'd lost the week before? No, it went down again. Especially on the weighted average, and then we saw, now we're seeing a huge disparity between northern type cattle, which have a higher quality grade. I mean, you guys get your feelings hurt if I say the quality's better. Well, there's a quality grade, USDA quality grade. It's better in the north. So those cattle, the better cattle up in the north, are trading at a significant discount to your cattle that are in the southern plains. And we saw the market, the overall market, go down again. Now, why did that happen? Because we have no leverage to try to get back what we'd lost the week before. And in fact, the guys that tried to show a little leverage and dig their heels in, they didn't get to sell any cattle. So we had a miserable movement of negotiated cash trade in your 5-area feeding region last week. Through Thursday, it was just over 23,000 head. And no more than we had confirmed on Friday. We're looking, it's going to fall well short of 30,000 head. That is ridiculous. That's what's happened. And part of the reason that the northern plains is trading at a significant discount now is because the previous week, when everything was down so much, not only did they sell the cattle a lot lower, they sold the cattle with time on them, 2, 3, 4 weeks in advance. So your packers are sitting back, got their needs filled. They know they're going to get a huge movement of formulated sales like they always do from their corporate buddies and their sweetheart deals. And so they don't have to buy any cattle. So they don't have to get hungry, and they don't have to push the market back up there where it belonged, or even steady with the sharply lower market from the week before. That's why we got to have mandated minimum negotiated cash trade requirement per large slaughter processing facility all over this country, but for sure in your 5-area feeding region. And that's what your Cattle Market Transparency Act asks for. It also asks for some more transparency so we can figure things out. And NCBA does not want this. So this past week, let's say that we had some minimum trade requirements in there. Your packers would have to get aggressive for those cattle, and what heaven forbid, they might have to pay a couple, $3-4 more for them, and then maybe your cattle feeders could scratch out a break even, or heaven forbid a profit, and then maybe they would come into your feeder cattle auctions the next week and get a little bit more aggressive. And then maybe a guy would be able to make a living raising cattle or background in cattle. He'd be able to pay his taxes, make his land payment, take care of his kids, put shoes on their feet, keep sending them to these rural schools that are the backbone of this country. This is what we need, guys. We absolutely need it. And NCBA wants to put it off. They want to try this 75% voluntary program, maybe kick it around like a can in the street for another year or two, something like that. Have you not been watching for the last 20 years? 20 years ago, all five major feeding areas sold or sold more than 50% negotiated cash basis. And we've dwindled all the way down where now in Texas we're about 6 or 7%. Kansas is less than 15%. Still Nebraska's, hanging into the low 40s, and Iowa's somewhere around 50%. But we've lost all the leverage, and we've lost this industry. And if we don't get something going to get it back, I mean, it's just a damn shame to watch it. And the powers that be are fighting the grassroots movement of this deal with those people's money that they pay every time they sell cattle. And I mean, it's enough to make you fighting mad. And I know a lot of guys that are, and I don't blame them. And I tell you what, I'm just trying to spread the word here, but I'm pretty passionate about this industry. And if you guys can't tell that and can't tell that I'm coming from the right place, you're not watching near enough. But I tell you what, we got to get this deal done. We got to get it done, and quit letting the bully mafia, the cattle industry, the NCBA, strong arming some of these states that have these weak, executive vice presidents or whatever their title is, that's running the show in these states. Offering them jobs in D.C., wanting them to buddy up with the other states that are fighting it and things like that. It's a crying shame, and especially you states out there that are predominantly cow-calf, and you're predominantly stocker operators and backgrounders. You should be ashamed of yourself, you affiliates that are fighting this minimum cash trade requirement. You should be ashamed of yourself. And you should have to stand there and answer to these people that are going broke because we can't keep any market position in this cattle industry. It's a disgusting deal. But we got to go on and start talking about the markets here. I want to. It's the start of a new month, so we've been doing for the last 6 or 8 months here. We've been doing your Zactran Market of the Month, and should not be a surprise. Your Zactran Market of the Month for October is going to be Nevada Livestock Marketing in Fallon, Nevada. And you guys know that I was there, and we had other representatives from DV Auction there. We had a lot of people there from all over the West. They held a big Trump rally, Ranchers for Trump they called it. They ended up, that thing just built and built and built, and they ended up getting Don Jr. to show up and speak at the rally. Had Charles Herbster there. They had a nice crowd there, probably around 1,000 people there. They fed about 500 people at $100 a plate. There was over 300 head of cattle that was donated for the Trump victory campaign. A lot more money was added back. People did doing rollover deals and this and that. There's over $350,000 that was raised there, and we also got some cred on it because Don Jr. had so much fun there and got such a kick out of a big banner that they had hanging on a cattle pot right next to the stage that said Don Jr. 2024. He ended up going back out in the crowd despite his Secret Service contingent not really wanting him to do that, but he went out there and had his picture taken, and he tweeted about it. He talked about it on some cable news shows, and talked about what a great time he had at the livestock auction in Fallon, Nevada, and all the ranchers and supporters that he had there. And it was fantastic that everybody got together and put that on. Want to compliment Jack Payne and his family there. That's his market, and not only did he have the Ranchers for Trump rally there, he had a special calf sale the very next day, selling a lot of those high desert calves. They're really high quality cattle. True Price Discovery right there through the ring, and does a good job, week in and week out there. But Zactran Market of the Month for October, Nevada Livestock Marketing, Fallon, Nevada. Let's talk about your board for last week, December live cattle futures. Monday was down just a pinch from that cattle and feed report, down 17 cents, but then it started coming back big time. Tuesday was up 65, Wednesday was up 62, Thursday was up $3.30. That's more than it could have went up on the first day before we had expanded limits, and then Friday up another 32 with December live cattle futures, which is your spot market now because we've lost both October contracts. But December ended the week at 108.30. That was up $4.95 for the week. Your February contract ended the week at 110.40, up $6.83 for the week. That is a big time recovery. Your April, all important April, sitting out there at 113.65. November feeder cattle, Monday was up 92, Tuesday up $1.72, Wednesday up $1.60, Thursday up 182, Friday up 167, with November feeder cattle ending the week at 137.40, up $3.88. Your January contract was ended the week at 134.12. That was up 4.47. Your fat cattle trade, I mean, dismal, disappointing, ridiculous light movement, like I mentioned there at the start. But through Thursday, in your entire 5-area feeding region, they had sold 23,400 head negotiated cash trade. That's sickening right there. And you think we don't need to get something done about this. But your live sales, steers and heifers sold from 103 to 106 and a quarter, with a weighted average through Thursday's sales of 104.16. That was about $1 lower, even though we'd gained all that ground on the board, and we'd pretty much recovered all the weakness that we'd seen the week before, and could not get anything going there because we have zero leverage in this industry. And dress sales 158 to 163. Your weighted average on dress steers through Thursday was 159.70. That was about $4 lower because all your dress cattle trade in the northern plains, and they're trading at a discount, of course. So, it's just, what gives? And for you people that can't understand it, and what really makes me sick is those that do understand it, have the ability to do something about it, and won't do anything about it. But Friday had just a little bit of cleanup sales there. Needed to sell another 50, 60, 70,000 head on Friday. Iowa sold about 1,000 from 102.75 to 103, the lowest they had sold all week, and some 162 dress. Nebraska about 3,000 head from 101 to 106, and dress sales at 163. Kansas had less than 1,000 at 106, and Texas didn't trade a hoof. Box beef cutout values. Your weighted average on all of last week's movement, choice cuts 207.15, down $1.88, but we did see some higher days through the trade sessions last week. Selects down just 154 at 189.84 on your weighted average for all of last week's movement, and just kind of a moderate volume of 745 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. Your slaughter was disappointing, mostly due to the bad roads and things they had in the southern plains. Had an ice storm that come through. My kids had a snow day there in the middle of the week. It got pretty nasty in the Texas Panhandle and in western Kansas and in western Oklahoma. Pretty nasty. I worked a racehorse sale at Heritage Place in Oklahoma City over the weekend. Was driving over from my home in Canyon, Texas on Thursday. The 4-hour drive took about 6 hours, waiting on tow trucks to digging these semis out of the ditch, and it was just wet enough that the ruts were deep, and they were ripping those rigs apart trying to get them out of there. But then whenever I got closer to Oklahoma City, it looked like a big band of tree trimmers had come through there and trimmed the trees and left the mess. But in fact, it was the ice storm that pulled the limbs down, and there's trees and debris everywhere around Oklahoma City there. And that's why El Reno Livestock Market at OKC West, they had to cancel their Tuesday and Wednesday sales because of the ice storm. And in fact, the power was out all over central Oklahoma, and still out at the end of the weekend. And all over Oklahoma City, you'd come to an intersection that the lights weren't working, the traffic lights weren't working, and things like that, because they just didn't have any power on, and people scrambling around. It was kind of a different type of a deal. But your slaughter was light due to icy roads and things like that. But 638,000 for the week last week was 5,000 less than the previous week, and 21,000 head less than the same week a year ago. We're not going to clean up the heavy carcasses that way, guys. Let's talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on DV auction ended the week at 135.05. That was up $2.47 compared to the end of the previous week. And you would have thought, with us gaining all that ground back on your futures, we shoved off that bearish cattle on feed report. Everything was looking positive. We had technicals that were positive. We had fundamentals that was positive. and we really couldn't gain much ground in your cash markets. Now the feeder cattle they did gain market where your cash fat cattle market continued to go down, but your feeder cattle cash markets did indeed go up, but we still got a lot of calves moving, and your support was mostly coming from the few yearlings that we saw around that were in high demand and paying higher prices for those, and we saw those stick out, especially late in the week. But starting the week here, probably going to continue to be light receipts in some of your high volume sales. Oklahoma City, like I said, they're having a lot of problems around there with power and stuff, and if a guy doesn't have power at his farm or ranch, he's probably going to be more worried about that than he is getting his cattle in to sell. But I'm not sure what kind of a run they're expecting in Oklahoma City, but I'd say it'd be fairly light. Joplin Regional Stockyards expecting a light run for them on Monday there, and they're not going to start till 8:30, and you know they're going to have a light run if they're not starting till then, because they get up and around pretty early and get stuff done. Let's talk about your cash feeder market for last week in your brick and mortar sales. Your calves were just kind of unevenly steady. We started to see, we've seen a hard frost in most of our areas, so your unweaned cattle, if they're fresh unweaned and not short weaned, starting to find a few more friends. More and more of our farmers are getting done with harvest. They're starting to enter the market. A lot of calves still moving, but we saw a few more outlets open up on your calves, and even though we got heavy supplies, just kind of unevenly steady, but it's good to see some support for your calves. And we saw some pretty high quotes on some reputation strains of calves there, especially mid to late week with the support from the board. The few yearlings that we saw around, and there's just not many of them, guys, but the few yearlings that we saw were as much as $3 higher around the circuit, and for sure up in the northern plains and the Midwest, if you had some really true yearling cattle up there, going to be hard to kind of keep them green because there hadn't been much for them to eat to keep them green this late in the year. But still a true yearling, even if they were backgrounded in some type of growing lot, they were finding quite a few friends. But light receipts all around due to the icy conditions in the southern plains and everywhere, and that probably could have helped the market a little bit. I did notice that your dryland wheat in western Oklahoma did pop a little bit. Thursday afternoon when I was driving into Oklahoma, they had just enough sunshine, and it doesn't take much moisture. Hadn't had any, but just enough moisture that I tell you what, that wheat was already popping. And even though it was ice, it was moisture, and the wheat prospects. You haven't talked to anybody that's turned any wheat cattle out, and nobody buying any, but it'll start stirring up a little bit now, because it'll keep those guys awake at night if they've got green wheat sitting out there where their cattle typically graze. But look at some markets there late in the week. How about Saturday at Fort Scott Livestock Market, Fort Scott, Kansas? They had a really good sale there, benefited from the higher futures all week long. But look at these load lots and bigger of feeder cattle, feeder steers that we saw at Fort Scott, Kansas. All of these listed here were well higher than what your index levels are. And the stick out deal that I saw here was 120 of those 869 pound steers bring 138.75. Then how about winter livestock? Not winter livestock. I know they have a lot of locations all around the country, but this is winter South Dakota winter livestock auction. 3,500 head around there of feeder cattle on Friday. Sharply higher prices. You can see automated report from Cattle Market Central there. You can see that the weighted averages are a lot higher. Look at some best tested weights. Over 1,350 head of 5-weight steers, average 553 at 164.34. That's over $9 higher on your weighted average than the previous week, and had a pretty good run the previous week. It's just that much better. Your heifers, 543 head of 5-weight heifers, average 537, 144.89 on the weighted average. That was higher too. Look at this big load of fancy steers here that topped the quotes there late in the week. It was the 118 head, 530 pound steers at 171.75. And that's your feeder flash for Monday.